Components of internal control. Internal control components are necessary to achieve internal control objectives. These constitute a recommended approach for the installation of internal controls in the public service organizations and provide basis through which these controls can be evaluated and improved as necessary. Internal control components apply to all operating aspects of an organization. There are 5 interrelated internal control components, namely control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. Taking one objective such as effectiveness and efficiency of operations, it is clear that all 5 components are important to its achievements. Each component row cuts across to all 4 general objectives. These can be further explained as follows. The control environment has overall influence on how strategy and objectives are established, and control activities are structured. Having set clear objectives and established effective control environment, an assessment of the risk facing the agency as it seeks to achieve its mission and objectives provide the basis for developing an appropriate response to risk. The major approach for mitigating risk is through internal control activities. Control activities can be preventive and or detective. Corrective actions are necessary complement to internal control activities in order to achieve the objectives. Control activities or corrective actions should have costs that do not exceed the benefits resulting from them, or being cost effectiveness. Effective information and communication is important for an agency to run and control its operations. Agency's management needs access to relevant, complete, reliable, and correct information related to internal or external events, as well as timely and proper communication of the information to those concerned. Information is needed throughout the agency to achieve its objectives. Finally, since internal control is a dynamic process that has to be adapted continuously to the risks and changes of an agency faces, monitoring of the internal control is necessary to help ensuring that internal control remains tuned to the change objectives, environment, resources, and risks. Control environment. Control environment is a general framework serving as a basis for other 4 components of internal control. It is the scope and coverage of an organization's internal control system which impacts on its structural and operational framework. The plan of organization. The plan of organization comprises the organizational structure as well as the management and the personnel setup which enable the organization to carry out its functions. The plan of the organization involves an organizational structure as well as the management and personnel. Organizational structure provides the framework within which the activities of an agency are planned, executed, controlled, and reviewed. Management and personnel, such as government employees, are expected to commit and demonstrate competence in the conduct of their duties and responsibilities. Each one, from the head of the agency to the rank and file, has to work for the achievement of the agency's objectives. Coordinated methods and measures. These are the control processes that are implemented and which form part of the normal recurring operations of an organization. They comprise the policies, rules, and regulations in every agency management system that support and become integral to the operations, such as human resource management system, financial management system, quality management system, performance management system. All or several office departments, units, and officials and or employees of the LGUs is involved in the implementation of these systems and policies. Also, control policies and measures such as delegation of authority and supervision, segregation of duties, access over resources, assets and facilities, checking completeness of transactions, documents, and reports, verification, reconciliation of financial and non-financial data. The control environment in the public service organization context is also sectoral and is not restricted by organizational boundaries. Thus, it includes the following: public service sector organizations providing public services, which refer to public entities, which generally pertain to agencies of the government and public offices, and private entities providing public services, such as utility and service providers and withholding tax agents. B. Constituents are the public to serve and stakeholders. The Local Government Code of 1991, the mandated and optional offices positions are indicated, but since the enactment of the LGC, there are new laws, issuances, and jurisprudence in which the mandates and requirements of the LGU increase from what is indicated in the Section 17 of the LGC in the basic services and facilities that the LGU need to provide. The LGU shall need to address the increasing mandates that it provides to the public it serves and to the stakeholders. Risk assessment. Risk assessment is the overall process of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. It should be conducted systematically, iteratively, and collaboratively, drawing on the knowledge and views of stakeholders. It should use the best available information, supplemented by further inquiry as necessary. Risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on objectives. The external context can include, but is not limited to, cultural, political, legal, regulatory, financial, technological, economic, natural, and competitive environment, whether international, national, regional, or local, key drivers and trends having impact on the objectives of the organization, perception and values of external stakeholders. On the other hand, the internal context can include, but is not limited to, capabilities understood in terms of resources and knowledge, such as capital, time, people, processes, systems, and technologies, information systems, information flows, and decision-making process, internal stakeholders, policies, objectives, and strategies that are in place, standards and references, models adopted by an organization, structures, the governance roles, and accountabilities. In risk identification, it refers to the identification of opportunities and threats to achievement of the control objectives, while risk analysis is the systematic use of information to identify the sources and to estimate the extent of the risk. And risk evaluation is the process of evaluating the significance of risk and assessing the likelihood of its occurrence. This can lead to a decision to, first, do nothing further, second, consider risk treatment options, third, undertake further analysis to better understand the risk, fourth, maintain existing controls, or reconsider objectives. Risk assessment at the organizational level. Risk can be assessed at the organizational and sectoral levels. Risk assessment must cover not only at the risk of public agencies, organizations, but also the risk to the network of public service sectors, organizations, the public to serve, and stakeholders that are involved in achievement of their sectoral goals and objectives. Risk assessment at organization level is done by having an assessment of controls, an assessment of operations, support, general administrative risks. Assessment of controls. The local chief executive primarily performs control risk assessment as part of its regular functions. In the course of control risk assessment, the LCE identifies, analyzes, and evaluates control risks which could have an impact on its control objectives and form a basis for determining how the risk should be managed. Assessment of operation, support, general administrative risk. Operation is the cost structure which consists of the programs and corresponding expenditures that relate to the main purpose for which an LGU had been created. STO is a cost component of an agency budget, which consists of activities and projects which provide staff, technical and or substantial support to operations, but do not produce goods or delivery services directed at a target population or client group, external to the agency. GAS is a cost component of the agency budget which consists of the activities and projects dealing with the provision of overall administrative management and operational support to the entire agency operations. Control activities. Control activities are the policies and procedures established to address risk and achieve the agency mandate and objectives. Control is a measure that maintains and or modifies risk. Controls include but are not limited to any process, policy, device, practice, and or other conditions and or actions which maintain and or modify risk. Control activities must be appropriate, cost-effective, comprehensive, reasonable, and directly relate to the control objectives and the agency mission. Appropriate means that the control activity is in the right place and is commensurate to the risk involved. Cost-effective means that the cost of implementation of the control activity should not outweigh its benefits. Risk response. Determining a risk and the response to it is an important part of decision making. Because risks are uncertain, deciding whether to accept or avoid a risk related to activity can have significant consequences for an organization. In general, there are ways to effectively respond to a risk. One is for some risk, the best response is to transfer them. This is done by removing the impact or the consequence of the risk event. Two, tolerating a risk is done when the ability to do something about it may be limited or the cost of taking an action is disproportionate to the potential benefits that can be derived. 3. Terminating the risk is usually done by eliminating the cost, since some risks could only be addressed or contained to acceptable levels by terminating the activity. 4. Risk treatment involves one or more options for modifying risk and implementing those options. Once implemented, treatments provide or modify the risk. Risk treatment options are not necessarily mutually exclusive or appropriate in all circumstances. The options can include the following: avoiding the risk by deciding not to start or continue with the activity that gives rise to the risk. 2. Taking or increasing the risk in order to pursue an opportunity. 3. Removing the risk source. D. Changing the likelihood. 5. Changing the consequences. 7. Sharing the risk with another party or parties, including contracts and risk financing. And then lastly, retaining the risk by informed decision. Performance review. Performance review of operations has to be performed by all units of an agency. Operating performance is reviewed against a set of standards on a regular basis, assessing effectiveness and efficiency. If performance reviews determine that accomplishments do not meet established objectives or standards, the processes and activities established to achieve the objective should be reviewed and to determine if improvements are needed. The design and implementation of improvements are the control activities. These improvements, when adopted, become part of the control environment. In the Philippine public sector, it is necessary to have a strategic performance management system, or SPMS, which one of the requirements is to have an Office Performance and Commitment Review, or OPCR, wherein the office concerned needs it to be approved by the head of the agency. It needs to be attained or to reach the target at the end of the rating period. There are 2 rating periods, January to June and July to December. Compliance reviews. It is not enough that a unit regularly reviews the level of its performance. It also has to review compliance with ethical and quality procedures, standards, cost efficiency principles, applicable laws, and managerial policies. The review aims to ensure that operations are conducted in accordance with laws, policies, and regulations. The compliance review may also be similar to quality management system conducted by the management, or combination of management and internal audit. Information and communication. Information and communication are vital in attaining the control objectives. They go hand in hand and cut across all other internal control components. Relevant information must be communicated throughout the agency, as well as to its network of organizations and sectors. All employees of an agency must understand their roles and responsibilities, including the effective communication of actions to external parties. All must receive a clear message from management on their internal control responsibilities. Likewise, other organizations within the sector must have a clear understanding of the standards set by an agency, including the reportorial obligations of these organizations to the agency, if any. Information. Information in the context of internal control refers to the act of receiving or giving data and information needed by public officials and employees in doing their jobs and understanding their roles and responsibilities. Information includes both internally generated data, operational, management, and compliance-related information, and information about external events, activities, conditions necessary for informed decision-making. It is necessary for the information to have a storage, and having a system in place like a knowledge management system wherein all information is stored, analyzed, shared, and used in all activities of the organization. Communication. It is the exchange of useful information between and among people and organizations to support decisions and coordinate activities. It relates to the free flow of relevant, complete, reliable, correct, and timely information up, down, across, inside, and outside the organization, including the public they serve, other public sector organizations, and sectors concerned. It is important that communication from the head of the agency is heard and known by the highest to the lowest unit and its employees. It is critical to ensure the attainment of the vision, mission, goals, and objectives of the organization. All things count, including simple communication moving forward. Accountability for transparency. Public sector organizations are accountable for transparency. Accountability for transparency requires that heads of agencies must establish mechanisms to inform their constituents about their policies, rules and procedures, plans, work programs, projects, services, and performance targets, expected results, and all other documents which may be classified as public information. There are existing mechanisms for accountability for transparency in the Philippine government, local government units. One of which is the Full Disclosure Policy or FDP of the DLLG, wherein LGUs are required to upload 14 documents on the FDP portal as well as posted on the LG website and the FDP board in 3 locations in the LGU. Here are some other mechanisms. 1. Ease of doing business and efficient delivery of government services involving the implementation of the Citizen Charter, Public Assistance and Complaints Desk, and Report Card Survey. Republic Act No. 6713 or Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees, and RA No. 3109 or Anti-Graft and Corrupt Practices Act requiring the following: a statement of assets and liabilities and net worth, disclosure of interest and financial connections, and disclosure of relation in government service by all public officials and employees. Establishment of review and compliance procedures, establishment of mechanism to make documents available to the public, and letter C, performance reports to the LG through an annual performance report. Public service sector organizations are accountable for transparency. Thus, in addition to providing information, the heads of the agency must also report to their constituents on the results of those plans and programs implemented and services delivered, and must ensure access to said reports and supporting documents. In the LGU, the LCE needs to report to its constituents through such as State of the Mayor Address or SOMA. Monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring as a component of internal control is aimed at assessing the quality of internal control systems' performance over time. Monitoring considers the collective effectiveness of the 5 components of internal control. It is aimed at ensuring that controls are operating as intended, that they are modified appropriately for changes in conditions. There are 3 ways through which monitoring is accomplished to wit. 1 is ongoing monitoring, which is ingrained in the daily operations and management of the organization. 2. Periodic separate evaluation of the control's effectiveness. And lastly, combination of ongoing monitoring and separate evaluation. Ongoing monitoring. Ongoing monitoring occurs when the normal operations and management of an organization provide feedback about the effectiveness of the internal control system. It includes regular submission of reports, performance measurement, and other management and supervisory activities. It is built into the normal, recurring activities of an agency and in all its operating and support services units. It is performed continually and on a real-time basis, reacts dynamically to changing conditions, and is ingrained in the agency's operation. This is done through conduct of management review, which includes top officials of the organization. In the case of the LGU, it includes all elected officials and department heads. Separate evaluation. Specific separate evaluations cover the periodic evaluation of the effectiveness of the internal control system to ensure that internal controls achieve the desired results through predefined methods and procedures. Separate evaluations can be useful by focusing directly on the control's effectiveness at a specific time. It may take the form of self-assessment as well as a review of control design and direct testing of internal control. This is a function of internal audit services wherein they conduct their own assessment and separate evaluation of all LGU's internal control system. And combination of ongoing monitoring and separate evaluation. In the assessment of the quality of the internal control system's performance, a combination of ongoing monitoring and separate evaluation will help ensure that internal control maintains its effectiveness over time. First is to conduct a baseline assessment of internal control systems or BAICs and assessment of control and internal audit risk. In the conduct of both assessments, it is necessary that the management and internal audit services are involved, coordinating, cooperating, and aligned with an objectives of having a comprehensive assessment report.